Here are 31 facts you definitely didn't know about Death Note. Like, did you know that this tiny object almost ruined the show? When Death Note's rough draft was first being created, it had something called the Death Eraser, with the power to revive dead people. All you had to do was erase your mom's name from the Death Note and poof, they would come back to life. But I think the author realized that this would have made the main character way too powerful, so it never appeared in the final version of the manga. Ryuk's original design is something else that never made the cut, but this time because it was too distracting. See, before the artist of the manga settled on this look, Ryuk was originally supposed to look like this. And that's because Obata, the artist, wanted the Shinigami to look like edgy meme lords. But there was just one issue. That original design of Ryuk was too good looking. Obata said that people would end up thinking Ryuk was the main character, so he decided to make Ryuk look nothing like a human being and changed the design to the flying zombie elf that we have today. It was definitely a good change, but I can't say the same for this next point because the entire production team somehow missed a critical animation mistake. In episode 1, when Light first sees the Death Note falling out of the sky, it lands on the ground face down. But later when he goes to pick it up, the cover is facing him. A mistake like that is just embarrassing, but it doesn't impact the story of Death Note, unlike this other mistake that changed the course of Death Note forever. After L's death, the series needed someone to compete against Light's massive brain, so they ended up replacing L with two big brains, Nier and Mello. But it wasn't until the anime began getting printed that the editors realized they had accidentally swapped the two characters. That's right, the quiet and lovable Nier was supposed to have this crazy design, and the obnoxious Mello was supposed to have this one. Recently, Obata admitted he was glad this mistake happened, and I gotta agree, even though Nier and Mello technically have the wrong designs, I think they're a much better fit for the story. A mistake like this could never happen with Light and L because they're completely different, and the anime shows this in very subtle ways. Like, did you know that Light has a Microsoft PC while L uses a Mac? Two brands that have been enemies for decades. Nobody sneaks in tiny details like Death Note's creator. But while he might have done a great job with the manga, it turns out that the guys who worked on the anime didn't do such a good job. And the best example of this is one of the Death Note's rules. In the anime, Ryuk tells Light that anyone who uses the Death Note can't go to heaven or hell. But the anime cut out the most important part of this rule because in the manga, Ryuk shares that all humans are doomed to this existence, meaning there's no afterlife in the Death Note universe. And this manga secret is hidden in the final scene of the anime. After Light gets exposed as Kira, he starts running away as fast as he can. Ryuk doesn't like this cowardly side of Light, so he writes Light's name in the Death Note. But it's not Light dying that's important, it's where he dies. Look at where he falls, exactly halfway up the staircase. This scene can be interpreted as Light running desperately from hell, the bottom of the staircase, while trying to reach the top of the staircase, or heaven. That's some beautiful symbolism. But did you know that the manga and anime have totally different scenes for Light's death? In the manga, you can see that his death is absolutely agonizing. His last moments here are pathetic as he goes out begging not to die while writhing in pain, which is completely different from the anime where he just quietly dies on the staircase. Yeah, the manga did Light dirty, but it's nothing compared to our next point, because the manga actually has a side story where Donald Trump buys a Death Note. But before we get into that, Death Note has a secret of its own, because its rough draft is actually kinda trash. Like, did you know that the main character was supposed to be nothing like Light Yagami? Taro Kagami was his name, and in the rough draft, he was only 13 years old. And he definitely wasn't as smart as Light, because after finding the Death Note, the kid couldn't even read its cover. And Taro didn't realize it was a Death Note until he used it as a diary and accidentally killed his bullies. This kid's a noob. But Taro did start to show some similarities to Light later on. In one chapter, he tried to rid the world of bad guys, but immediately felt bad and destroyed his Death Note. It's probably for the better though, since Taro didn't die like Light. In fact, the rough draft shows him grow up and live a happy life. But wait a minute, do you recognize this image of him as an adult? It turns out that the creator ended up using Taro's adult design in the official anime for Mikami, one of Light's minions. Obata really just threw some glasses on Taro and called it a day. Now, did you know that with just one Death Note, Light was able to kill over 250,000 people? Since he had the Death Note for about 6 years, this means he killed 40,000 a year and an average of 114 people a day. But there is a limit to the Death Notes. You see, there can only be up to 6 active Death Notes at once. If a 7th Death Note were dropped into the world, it wouldn't have any special powers, and the only way to make it work would be to destroy one of the other Death Notes. It's definitely a good thing they aren't real, but that doesn't mean they haven't had some deadly influence in real life. Way back in 2005, Death Note was getting so popular that Chinese students were pretending to be Kira. They literally made fake Death Notes and wrote down their teachers' names. But China doesn't play around, so they immediately banned the anime in every school where the kids did this. Now, those kids were just trying to have a little fun, but a couple years later, some psychos took the Kira craze to the next level and killed someone. It was 2007 in Belgium when a body was found in a park. There was a note next to it that said, "I am Kira," but this wasn't a one-man job. 3 people eventually got arrested and received 20 years in prison. They really ruined their lives just to recreate an anime, huh? But the Death Note also ruined Light's life. Oba, the creator of the anime, said that Light is actually a victim of the Death Note. If he had never found the notebook, Light would have ended up as one of the greatest police leaders of all time and worked side by side with L. Those two could have been a dynamic duo, just like the creators of this series. It was written by Sugumi Oba and drawn by Takashi Obata, who originally didn't want to work on it. As a superstitious guy, he was afraid of drawing Shinigami, the gods of death. After a lot of thinking, Obata decided to bring his artistic genius to Death Note, and I'm not exaggerating. Obata is so talented that one of the most popular manga artists has worked under him, Yusuke Murata, One Punch Man's artist. But if I'm being completely honest, the author of the story is a lot more interesting. And that's because Oba's identity is a secret. Nobody even knows if Sugumi Oba is his real name. It could just be a pen name. This dude is the real-life version of L. But actually, I would say Oba's a little sneakier than L, since Oba's real name is still a mystery. After Death Note finished, a special volume came out and spilled the beans. The volume came with this suspicious name card, and on the back of the card is L's real name, L. Loliot. That's right, his name is literally L. What a big brain play. Now, did you know that L was supposed to have kids? He was gonna be Nier and Mellow's dad right until the writer realized one crucial thing. There's no way L could ever get married. He's got no riz. It's harsh, but fair. Take a look at some of the weirdest things he does. Like, this dude literally doesn't take showers. He's too busy for those. So instead, he jumps into the washing machine, and the way he sits is the final nail in the coffin. According to him, his reasoning ability drops by 40% if he doesn't sit this way. He literally never sits normally, not even on the toilet. Yeah, we gotta get L some therapy. But let's talk about the kid who was almost his son, Nier. When I first saw his N logo, I thought he was ripping off L, but Nier's logo has an Easter egg that you probably didn't know. Other than the obvious N, you can also see the outlines of the letters A, T, and E, spelling out Nate, or Nier's real name. He's a really smart guy, but he's probably the only character with a normal name. See, Oba chose weird names for his main characters so that nobody would get bullied for having the same names. But the ridiculous names weren't only saved for the main cast. If you pay attention to the names written in the Death Note, you'll realize how crazy sounding they are. Just look at the examples in this manga panel. Tours denote? What does that even mean? In another interview, Oba revealed that he purposely chose gibberish names so that nobody would ever see their own name written in the Death Note. Now, if seeing your name in the anime is disturbing, imagine seeing your face. Because in 2020, a side story came out that included real people. This story takes place 10 years later, with a guy named Minoru Tanaka finding the Death Note. He has the highest IQ in his class, but other than that, he's nothing like Light. In fact, he didn't even use the Death Note. Minoru decided that he was going to sell it, and anonymously started a bidding war between countries. And believe it or not, President Trump made an entrance and bid trillions of dollars on the Death Note, claiming he wanted to keep it under government supervision so that nobody else could use it. Even though this was probably a lie, Minoru didn't care and he sold it to the USA. Unfortunately for Minoru, the Shinigami King didn't like how this affected the human world, so he made a new rule decreeing that anybody who sells or buys a Death Note will die. Ryuk delivers the Death Note to Trump and tells him about the new rule, so Trump ends up declining it and loses trillions of dollars in the process. But Minoru is the guy who really got screwed, because Ryuk didn't bother telling him about the new rule. So when Minoru Kira went to withdraw his trillions from the bank, he died of a heart attack. When it comes to heart attacks, the Death Note isn't the only thing causing it, because some of these Netflix adaptations are just trash. But it turns out that Japan is doing its best to keep Death Note alive. They've made 4 movies, 1 short film, and a web series. But it gets even crazier than this, because there's a Death Note musical. Unfortunately, there's no English version, but it looks hilarious. But diving back inside the Death Note universe, did you know that L is fluent in 6 languages? But he's not just smart, L can fight too. Just look at the scene where he wrecked Light with a kick. Some hardcore fans studied the scene and realized that L's form looks just like capoeira, a martial arts style that combines fighting and dancing. When fans shared this theory with Oba, he liked it so much he officially announced that L knows this fighting style. But one thing I don't understand is how L is so skinny even though he mostly eats sweets. L's excuse is that his brain burns so many calories that no matter what he eats, he'll stay thin. I don't really believe this, so maybe it'll just always be a mystery. And speaking of mysteries, let's talk about this strawberry, the biggest mystery in all of Death Note. In this scene, L gives the detective a strawberry, and this detective does something insane with it. He puts it in his pocket. To this day, there's no explanation. Why did he put the strawberry in his pocket? Was this fruit the key to catching Kira? We may never know. One thing I do know is that the animators hate Mello because they censored his super cool design. See, in the manga, Mello wears a cross around his neck and a bracelet on his wrist, but the anime turned the cross into a stick, and Misa got the same treatment. In the manga, her jewelry was cross-shaped, which was cut from the anime. For some reason, pretty much every studio removes any mention of religion in anime. But what about Ryuk's apples? They're definitely a reference to Adam and Eve, right? Well, it turns out the apples don't symbolize anything. Death Note's creator admitted that he just thought a red apple would contrast well with Ryuk's dark design. Now, if you take a look at Death Note's second opening, you'll notice these nuts. These blue roses. In Chinese folklore, they symbolize unattainable love, which directly connects to Misa's goal of being with Light. She loves him with her whole heart, but he's just using her. But the most meaningful scene is the very last chapter of the manga. See, the last page of the chapter shows Kira's worshippers gathering under the moon. And this doesn't make much sense until you take a look at Light Yagami's last name. You see, one of the Japanese characters used in Light means moon, and the word Yagami translates to night god. So even though these Kira worshippers didn't know Light's name, they're still paying the ultimate homage by being in the moonlight. I gotta say, worshipping a literal serial killer is pretty insane, but not as crazy as this next video where I found out the best foreshadowing scenes in Attack on Titan. Watch it!